Yo, what's going on, guys? And today, of course, we got to talk about this report from Marc Stein of the Stein line suggesting that the Karl-Anthony Towns trade was actually a precursor to a New York Knicks, Milwaukee Bucks, Giannis Antetokounmpo trade. So that's something that I think is really interesting when you look at it. So basically, let's read what he wrote on his stacks, the Stein line. And basically what he wrote was, this is the report so you guys know exactly what we're talking about. Hit that like and subscribe button before we start today's videos so you guys don't miss any updates like this. So this is what he wrote. And it goes a little like this. I've heard more than one rival team since the trade, mind you, wonder aloud about whether having a player of Karl-Anthony Towns' caliber on the roster for a potential future Giannis Antetokounmpo offer was among the Knicks' motivations for giving in on their long-held reluctance and to include Donte DiVincenzo in trade talks, with the Timberwolves being pushed for the deal's completion when they did that on top of New York's obvious need for a frontline center. It's kind of weird how he phrased that, but basically what he's saying is that they do this to kind of like foreshadow a potential, Mr. Giannis Antetokounmpo to come in New York. And maybe. So let's kind of break it down for you guys. And I really do want to hear your thoughts. I know it's been a rough start for the Knicks with their new squad, but it's still going to work out. So basically, Karl-Anthony Towns brought them the center and a player to give them a core that can match the Boston Celtics. And he's a guy who's shown that he can, play both sides of the court, give them the scoring versatility that they needed next to Jalen Brunson to have a legit 1-2-3 punch with him, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, the whole gang. And the thing is Towns has a significant contract. This year he's making $49.2 million, and that's going to be increasing in the subsequent years, which is a considerable financial burden for the Knicks. And with the salary cap, implications with the aprons, him making 53 the following year, 57. So the move positions the Knicks with a all-star, all-NBA caliber player to use or leverage in a trade package for a superstar like Giannis that would maybe make them have a compelling package. While the salary cap structure right now, you have to think about is that OG Anunoby's making $36 million. You got $25 million from Brunson, who obviously that's going to also continue to go. So Towns' contract puts pressure on the team's cap space, as we said. So besides that, you got Mikal Bridges and Josh Hart, who are making 23 and 18 apiece, respectively. With Towns balancing out the team and then understanding that with every move they do, it's going to have ramifications for another move, which makes you think, okay, Giannis's contract with the Bucks has him as one of the highest paid players in the entire league. And with the salary obviously escalating over the next years, 48 this year, 57 next year, 62 and 66 to follow that, you'd have to think that you got to first, obviously, if they're trading Karl-Anthony Towns, technically, I guess they would be getting a discount, but they're basically paying for the same thing. And in a trade scenario, you'd either think that they want to keep their championship aspirations open or they would go into a rebuild. Either way, Karl-Anthony Towns would be a guy that would help you rebuild and get multiple, stuff. So I would think that'd be something that you'd have to consider. Now, the Knicks draft capital, with the Stepien Rule being in consideration, the Knicks still holds a bunch of picks regardless that they traded for both Mikal Bridges and Karl-Anthony Towns this offseason. If you guys didn't know, the Stepien Rule, which prevents teams from trading consecutive first-round picks, is something that they have to think about when they're going ahead. So the available picks they actually have is a 2025 first-round pick via Detroit. It's protected 1 through 13. Then they have a first-round pick through Washington, protected 1 through 10. And that's just for this year. 2026, they have their own pick still. And then they have some second-rounders that we're not going to mention the second-rounders. They have their own first-round pick in 2030 and 2031. So those are the picks that they could trade for Giannis Antetokounmpo if they were going to do it this offseason, as those would be the ones that, you'd assume multiple draft picks would be included for a deal for a former MVP and still MVP level player in Giannis Antetokounmpo. Now, looking at the rest of that, I think the biggest thing we got to look about is if the Knicks leverage a package for Giannis Antetokounmpo, it's going to be centered around Towns paired with draft assets, and they might not have to add complementary players if they give up enough picks, but if they do, maybe it's like a Deuce McBride or something. But that's where I think it's going to get rather interesting when you look at the structure of this, as the move's obviously going to be if, they don't think this core is good enough, which could possibly be the thing. This is the whole strategic planning that they have to think about if they still have the ambition to continue to build up as a contender if a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo becomes available, which I think is something to think about, definitely. So what else do you have to think about when you're looking at that? Because if this were to happen, I think from what we've heard, if Giannis were to ask out, it's going to be closer to next offseason. Not going to happen this season. The earliest it would happen is next offseason. And it really seems like what would have to happen is just another repeat of last year where they lose in the beginning of the playoffs. He ends up like just feeling like whatever he has in Milwaukee, which seems to be very close and dear to his heart, is like unsalvageable, and that he has to move on to have success, and that his loyalty is no longer what's going to keep him there. So that, I feel like, again, I've said it before, they would have to have an incredibly bad year. Like, we're talking real bad year, like very similar to what had happened last year. And also Doc Rivers has to be the worst coach in the world for them to have hired to think this. And it just seems like a lot of mismanagement. Again, a lot of things have to happen because, first off, for them to have already fumbled the bag in this process and for Giannis to still want to be here, huge. But for them to continue to fumble it and for him to continue to look at it, another big thing. But for the Knicks, if they were to trade for Giannis, it's basically because he's available. It's not because this team isn't good enough. I think this team, is still good enough, but it's basically, it's like, hey, if Giannis comes available, you're thinking in their top season, Karl-Anthony Towns, Deuce McBride, or Josh Hart and a couple other guys with a bunch of picks, the remaining picks you can offer, might get that deal done. Who knows? And if they are able to do that, that's actually incredible. It just goes a testament to show how good of a organization the Leon Rose, Tom Thibodeau, New York Knicks have become. Who would have thought James Dolan would have had a competent basketball team? I wouldn't have. I mean, it is what it is. But yeah, that's basically the video. I want to hear your guys' thoughts in the comment section. Is there anything else you guys would have liked to have heard? Let me know. That's basically everything I had thought about when we're talking about the Knicks potentially positioning themselves to get Giannis Antetokounmpo by trading Karl-Anthony Towns.